chapter.
That's what I used to do.
I feel like people have the wrong idea of what studying is. It's not to spend 6 hours studying a day. It really doesn't take that long. It's half an hour every day, and that's really all you need to pass.
Tell it for the people in the back, you know?
People don't know about this. You don't need to be taking all of your books home.
And how do you keep track of, let's say, your focus without, let's say, wandering off or dozing off? Hot take. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of the show. I'm your host with the most. Now, it's been a while, and we're finally off of our hiatus. It's because we needed some new equipment, and we finally have them now. Now, this week's episode is going to be about effective studying methods because we're rapidly approaching exams week. And it's not just a week. It's going to be, well, I've been a student before, and if I could call it anything, I'll call it Hell on Earth week. Now, for today's episode, I have two wonderful guests. One of them is a returning guest, and one is a brand new guest. So you can introduce yourselves.
I'm Dima, a reoccurring guest. You might know me from the pilot episode where we talked about resilience.
Yep. Hi, I'm Jude, and this is my first time on the ProudCast.
Now, it's lovely to have both of you here, and it's lovely to have you here, Jude, for the first time, and it's amazing to have you here again, Dima. Now, since you two are some top achievers of our school, we'd like to ask you, how do you guys ensure that you study well and get good marks?
For me, I feel like people have the wrong idea of what studying is. It's not just about opening a book and reading and just hoping that you'll understand, or maybe watching a few videos or whatnot.
It doesn't work on hope alone.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I feel like there's so many different techniques that you can use. For me, I mainly use the Feynman technique, which is basically you kind of envision yourself as if you were to teach someone else the topic. So if you were reading off of the book, for example, and you find a piece of information, and to be able to fully comprehend it, you try to envision that there's someone in front of you and that you're tasked to explain this to them. And while doing that, it kind of tricks your brain into learning the information yourself, which kind of seems weird because you'd be talking to yourself, but
Yeah.
it really works.
We're having a schizo episode, but we're actually studying, you know?
Yeah. Another thing is that I feel like summaries work a lot because for textbook, there's so many things that are just not tested on or things that you don't really need to know. It's just extra info. And so summaries can help you save a lot of time, especially if you have external exams and you just study a lot of different textbooks and you have so much to do. It's a lot better to, for example, to spend your summer summarizing what you've taken that year. So for example, we have IGCSE next year.
Yeah.
The plan for me this summer is to summarize everything that we've done this year so that next year when we do end up having IGCSE, I don't have to go back and study the entire book again.
Essentially. So, a big chunk of it involves planning and managing your time, let's say.
As well as notes are also really important. I feel like when I look at a lot of different classmates and students, I feel like I notice that their notes aren't very organized or they're very plain. I feel like a lot of people know this and a lot of people don't know this as well. Notes can actually make a really big difference because your brain remembers certain colors as well. And I think that some people might notice that sometimes in the exam, if you get a question, you know exactly where the info is and in what color, but you just can't seem to remember it.
Yeah.
And I think that
used to happen to me a lot.
that just goes to show that your brain remembers colors. And so if you have really colorful notes and really organized notes, that could really help you out a lot. You don't have to spend your entire day. You don't have to spend 6 hours studying a day. It really doesn't take that long. It's half an hour every day, and that's really all you need to pass. Or not even just pass, just succeed as well.
Yeah.
Because if you just pay attention in class, I feel like that's what I do as well, is just really focus in class so that you can get most of the topic down at least. And then once you get home, go over anything that you don't remember or anything that you might have not understood. It makes it a lot easier for you. You don't have to spend hours studying for every subject for the exam.
You know what you said, what you do during class time also plays a part in your learning. I want to ask Jude about that.
Yeah?
And I want to say, what do you do during class to ensure that you fully understand the topic, let's say?
Just focus, honestly. A lot of people seem to overlook something, and it's that you can't skip anything when you study. A lot of students, when I ask them, or when they ask me at least, is this coming in the chapter? I can't just say yes or no. A lot of people say, oh, that might not come, don't bother studying it. No, focus on everything, regardless if it might come or not. Everything is important, and everything should have your full level of focus. Otherwise, you will mess up somewhere, or that one question or that one paragraph you forgot to read. It's
Yeah.
probably in the quiz somewhere.
That one paragraph that you said, it's not gonna come.
No, the
anyway."
one diagram you said, "Oh, I know this already." It's
Yeah.
probably gonna show up.
It's common knowledge.
Yeah, it's
And
happened
it's
before.
just like the entire quiz. It's just that one topic that you didn't study.
Yeah. So it's just focus, I think. That's
And how
about
do
it.
you keep track of, let's say, your focus without, let's say, wandering off or dozing off?
Personally, I do wander and doze off, but I feel like if that does happen, I just turn to the teacher and say, "Would you mind repeating that? I wasn't focused." Asking questions is not something that should be shameful. It only helps you learn more, especially if you are, not well informed about a subject. Just ask,
Tell it to
Yeah.
the audience. Tell it to the audiences.
Yeah, just like say, "Oh, I don't understand." Just ask questions if you don't get it, because it really saves you a lot of time from self-studying. Yeah, because sometimes that can bring up issues. Sometimes the videos are unclear for you. Ask a question, ask for it to be repeated. You won't regret it at all. It's not
Exactly.
shameful.
Exactly. Like us teachers, we love it when students ask questions, although not all the time, because some students, well, let's just say that they don't ask good questions. But in case of, let's say, someone dozes off or wanders off or happens to have a daydream in the middle of the class, which we are all prone to doing at some time to time, there is no harm and there is no problem in asking the teacher, like, "Hey, mister, could you repeat that?" Or, "Hey, miss, could you repeat that, please? I didn't quite catch it." Now, what about you, Dima? What do you do during class time?
I feel like it's kind of a joke, but it's also very serious. Lock in. Genuinely. I mean, it took a while for me to learn how to focus because I also have a short attention span. And so if someone's talking to me for more than 3 minutes, what did you say?
Good luck staying on the podcast, I guess.
Yeah, I cannot really pay attention for that long. But it's not impossible for you to learn how to focus for long periods of times. If you end up teaching yourself, there's a lot of resources online that you can look for that can help you improve your focus, and you can control your focus as well. Like, you can learn how to just tune everything else out, and you can only see or hear what you're looking at or what you want to. And another thing, when it comes to studying techniques that I forgot to mention, was active recall. That also helps a lot because it just refreshes your memory. It's not just something where you study it once and then you just hope that you remember. Active recall is really important. Like, throughout the day, if you're, say, in the kitchen doing something, just randomly state whatever you remember, right? So you
How
don't
do you
forget.
how do you do that? Like, explain a little bit more about active recall.
So, for example, if you have certain things that you need to memorize, basically, especially if it's equations or just anything that needs to be memorized, it's not something that you can just explain and basically freestyle in the exam. Is to take it one sentence at a time. If it's something that's a bit challenging, is to look at it one sentence at a time. Just cover everything else. Look at that one sentence, read it a few times, and then try covering it and saying it out loud without looking at it. And then once you do that, you move on to the next sentence. Memorize that by itself, and then merge those two together and see if you can remember the first and the second together until you're done.
So, essentially counting and then counting an extra number and then going back and put 2 and 2 together to make 1,
Yeah,
let's say. Now, what about you, Jude?
I feel like another important factor to getting a lot of good grades is just your environment. Like, I will admit, sometimes I might drop a comment to one of my friends in the middle of the lesson and get told to be quiet. But I feel like that happens to everyone at some point.
Exactly.
It's
It happened to me as well.
Yeah, have fun, I guess. In the middle of the lesson, try to find something that makes you interested or anything like that. Just have fun, because if you're stressed, you won't get good grades. It's what it is. I know a lot of my friends are, they study really hard. They study over the entire summer. They study when they get to school, and then in the exams, they get stressed out and they make mistakes everywhere.
That's
And I
something
don't
that I also advise a lot of students and our audiences back at home. Guys, don't stress out during the exam time.
Yeah.
You have had ample amount of time to study and then to review everything that you have had ever taken and everything that is expected to come in the exam. And there's no point in, let's say, stressing out, thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna fail," or negative thinking leads to negative results.
Yeah,
you know?
you just have to have confidence. As long as you have confidence, everything else is just gonna set itself in its place.
Yeah. Now,
Just trust yourself. You know what you studied, and you know that you reviewed it well. So why stress about it?
exactly. Now, I want to ask you, since you brought it up, I want to ask you about the confidence part. How do you ensure that you have high confidence in yourself?
Help other people, I think. A lot of my friends, when they don't understand something, they come to me for help. And when I understand it, when I explain it to them maybe once or twice, I start to understand it even more. And then that just helps me, believe that if somebody else can understand it from me, I can understand it from myself. And if I know it well enough to explain it to someone else, then I'm prepared for this. And I shouldn't be worried about it too much. So it's the same as active recall, but to somebody else, I think.
Yeah.
Just remind them every now and then
And
about a certain
there's this
subject.
beauty of learning. Like if you help someone learn, you're actively helping yourself learn as well.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways, when you teach someone, when you are learning by yourself, or when you're helping someone else learn. Now, I want to bring it all together, let's say, and talk about the part of the environment. Ask you both.
Yeah.
We can start with Dima as well, but what about like distractions? How do you ensure like you've eliminated all the distractions that surround you?
I feel like it's the same thing where it's just learning how to tune everything out. If you have a certain focus or a certain goal that you're working towards, then just look to that. Don't try to, find other things and whatnot. Especially now during exam season, everyone's stressed, or sometimes you get distracted and you don't have time to study or whatever. I feel like don't stress out, because if you studied and you found a correct technique for you that works for you, then it's mainly just one sentence: trust what you know. Because if you know it, then that's it. Just trust yourself. If you got it, then you got it,
Yeah.
As well as the fact that, like, the thing is that this is our technique, right? It's how we study, but that might not work for everyone at home. That might not work for you. It's very important to find what works for you. There's so many different techniques. Blurting. Some people doodle while reading something. You could just have like a sticky note in front of you where you just draw circles with a pen while staring at, your computer or your textbook and reading something. That can also help you focus. Because if you're doing something while reading, it actually does help you focus on what you're doing at the time.
So yeah, we've spoken about like effective learning, and let's say like how you found out your style of learning. Now I want to ask Jude, how do you find out your style of learning? Because clearly what works for Dima does not work for you, let's say.
Yeah. I think it's just experimentation. But don't do it with your actual studies, because that will mess everything up if something is not your style. I say maybe over the summer, like pick up a new hobby, a new skill, try learning a new language, and see what helps you remember. Let's say you're picking up French. Try practicing some words in that language in different styles of learning, and see if that helps you remember some of the words or some of the information. Just make sure it doesn't affect anything in your actual studies, because that will throw everything off.
Yeah, so experiment during your time off. Don't experiment like during your actual time of studying, let's say, because that's going to affect your overall mark, let's say, or the bottom line.
Yeah, but the thing is, if your marks are already not doing so well, like, what you're doing right now is not working for you, switch it up then. If you already are not doing as well as you should be doing.
If you're already hit rock bottom,
If you already
then
are
that's it.
sinking, try something else,
Yeah.
But don't do things like, okay, maybe some of the methods online won't work for you. I say make up your own methods. Because for me, a lot of the stuff that works is not something I found online. Like, Dima finds, I suppose, resources really useful. I don't. The more I study, the more I overthink it. But that doesn't mean I don't study. I do maybe skim. I look at the stuff that I might forget. Another thing is, don't waste your time on things that, let's say, that will make you overthink.
Yeah.
Like, for example, for me, a subject I'm good in, let's say English, right? I study for English, just not as much as I would for math or biology.
Yeah.
Time management, you would say.
Yeah.
That would really help. Just focus on certain things and not really, like, things that you're not exactly, worried about.
Exactly. And something else for English, I'm not going to say this because I'm biased. I'm an English teacher. No. But something else for English, you study only the parts that you doubt that you will forget. Otherwise, everything else is reliant on your skill. Whether reading and writing, you don't actually memorize or try to remember what you read and what you wrote. No. You try to remember or you try to practice the skill.
It's just techniques in English. So as
Yes.
long as you know the techniques, the words that you use, rope them all together. So it's not like you have to memorize what sentences to write. It's just know the techniques and do the rest. But for things like biology, you have a lot of diagrams. You have a lot of information to memorize. In that situation, you put a lot more focus into that than you would English or some other subject that doesn't require as much thinking.
Or let's say, like, the other sciences, physics, chemistry. You have to memorize a lot of laws.
Yeah,
Like law of gravitational forces or Ohm's law or whatever.
I already want to leave. Let's not talk about physics. This is about effective teaching methods. Yep.
Yeah. Now, there's something that I want to draw comparison to, or between, let's say, and that is my traditional style of learning versus your new, brand new, let's say, new school style of learning. The way I learned before, no, I'm not going to talk about all the spanking and rulers that we've been hit with, no, but I'm going to talk about, let's say, how I learned or how I studied. I did everything with a pen and paper. Even the information that I needed to remember, I do it with a pen and paper. And to me, that was effective. I guess you could say I experimented and found out that this worked with me. Because I need to remember information, I need to remember, etc., etc. But what about, let's say, the new school style of learning?
For me, I also tried that, and I actually used to do that when I was in primary, because obviously my dad had the same style of learning, because it's old school. Almost all our parents learned that way.
Yeah, I always argued with my parents. They see me with a book but not a pen and paper, and they say, Muhammad, why don't you get a pen and paper?
Yeah, exactly. Because like, when المسودة,
Yes,
basically.
exactly.
Like, you need a piece of paper and a pen. And I had been doing that throughout all of primary, and I still had good grades, but it just wasn't really working for me. Because for me, my brain will not remember something if I write it down a million times, but it'll remember if I say it like twice. And so that didn't work for me, of course. But for now, the more, like modern way of learning is mainly resources for me. For example, like a resource that I like using is like Notion, or for us, for our school, since we're Pearson, Pearson Active Learn, they have a website and you can find your textbooks there.
Yeah.
You just need to own the textbook itself. And
Tell it for the people in the back,
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't know about this. You don't need to be taking all of your books home. You don't need to be going home with a bag that's bursting open with all your textbooks. You can just have them all online. If you just own the physical copy, you can just get the code for it from the cover and just have an Active Learn account, which all you need is an email for.
Now, again, going off of like Pearson using it as an online source, you don't have to carry your bag with you all the way back home with all your books. You can develop scoliosis back when you're older. You don't have to develop scoliosis now.
Exactly, and looking at a screen can sometimes be more effective for some people. Some people might learn more if they're just looking at an iPad or a laptop, or even their phone as well. You can even have it on your phone. Rather than just looking at a textbook, I feel like you can also get really bored or just zone out as well. If you're looking at a textbook, it can get really boring. Another resource that I personally use is Notion. So Notion is basically an app, and it's even available on the web as well, where it just organizes your space. You can have your Spotify linked to it, and you can have a specific playlist for studying. I mean, a lot of people seem to study with music, but not efficiently. I feel like I see so many people talk about how, oh yeah, I'm gonna study with music, and then like 5 minutes later, they're just like singing along, and then the textbook is just closed.
Yeah, they're blasting Playboy Cardi or Cardi B or something.
Yeah, exactly. For studying with music, it's not about studying with music that you like. It's studying with music that will get you to focus. For example, nothing with lyrics, just like a melody or like a random beat or something. Nothing that will distract you from what you're doing. And it just organizes your space for you. You can have like a bunch of notes. You can plan everything. There's a calendar as well. And you can write whatever, you want in there, flashcards and whatnot, or any resources, links that you want to have in there. It's just like a personalized space.
It's a personalized space that organizes everything that you could possibly need, or let's say jot down, compared to what we have, which was miswadda, pen and paper and everything. I feel like I'm from the Stone Age at this point. Now, to talk about like the music part, there's actually a scientific fact and statistically proven as well that studying with classical music improves brain functions and cognitive functions by a large percentage. So you can look up classical music, Mozart, Beethoven, whoever. I remember some teachers used to also blast in the corridors and the hallways classical music.
So
Yes.
he would dance along to it inside the class as well.
Exactly. Now, you can listen to them, you can study to them, but not dance to them. No. Now, what about you, Jude? How do you use, let's say, some new school styles of learning?
I guess it's just that I don't really have research on what is considered, old school or, recent studying methods, especially because the household that I grew up in is very, with the times. Like my parents aren't exactly only pen and paper or sit down, study for this long. They let me just, do things on my own. They
Yeah.
trust that if I study on my own, I can pass.
I'm tempted to ask, like, what sort of studying method that your parents disagreed with? We could classify that as new school, let's say.
Yeah, they don't really like, let's say, how do I explain it? Breaks. They don't like when you take breaks. Like for me, majority of my studying is breaks because I can't focus for too long. My focus.
She
is just-
studies in between breaks.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I have study breaks.
She doesn't take a break in between study sessions. No, she studies
It's a
in
whole
between
break. No, it's a whole break. Every 5 minutes I study. Anyway, it's like it helps me. For example, if I'm watching a video, I will study every now and then, and it actually helps me remember. For example, I remember when the YouTuber said this. I studied this, so I know the information based off of the video. And they don't really like that. They think, oh, you're not going to be focused and that kind of stuff. But then again, they trust me, so they don't say don't do it. They just say we're worried that it's gonna mess something up. So
Nice. So it's like you associate subjects and topics with, let's say, something you've read and seen online.
yeah. Also, in real life, in the middle of class, if I hear something, I will make a joke out of it, just so later I can remember the joke I made and I can remember what I said.
Comedy works.
Yep.
Food works too.
Food works too.
Yeah, if you have, I feel like I've seen people do this before, and it actually might be effective. Personally, probably not for me, but like it might work for some people where if you have just like a small snack or just multiple of them, you can have it in sections. So you need to study like a lot of material, you can just have like one between every chapter.
That's what I used to do.
And then it's like motivation to finish everything. Not just motivation, but you can also remember like, oh, when I ate this, I was studying this. And so it helps you remember as well. But personally, I don't really take breaks as much. Like Jude said, I don't take breaks at all if I can. But if I'm studying for a really long time, then obviously if you're studying for multiple hours, you should take like 5 minutes off. I don't take breaks because I find that it just loses my focus a lot. Because I feel like I've seen a lot of people do this where I'm just going to take a 5-minute break and then you lose all your focus and you're just, scrolling on your phone for like 2 hours. And now,
Doom scrolling for the rest of the day.
yeah, you're just scrolling or like having a snack or something. And then it's late and now, I got to sleep. I can't study, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't find breaks that efficient for me.
It's like it hits 7. You say I'm gonna study at 7. And it hits 7:01.
I got to wait till 8.
Yeah, I gotta wait till 8.
No, that's why for me it's an entire break in between it I study because technically there's no way I can say, oh, I'll continue my break if the whole thing is a break. Like I'm like, I'll go on my phone for like 30 minutes and then like for the next 20 I'll study. And it's in intervals, It really helps. I think for me, especially because I can't focus for too long. I don't know what the problem is. I tell all of the teachers, they tell me, do you study? Not as much as I should be. I remember multiple teachers saying, you should study, because you have IGCSEs next year, you should study at least 3 hours every day. That's torture. I think I will die before I can get an hour in.
Hot take.
Yeah, I guess it's a hot take, but you cannot expect me to study for that long. I cannot. That's why for me, I think it's easier to take multiple breaks. I mean, everything's different for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think don't be ashamed of the way you study, because the way you study might not seem conventional for somebody else, but if it works for you, continue doing it. It doesn't matter if it seems like it's, immature or something. If you're passing, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
Now, the way I used to study is that I would record myself. I guess you could call this new school, old school merging together thing. Let's say that I had a big passage that I needed to remember and understand. I'd record myself reading it, and then I'd put an earpiece, let's say AirPods, whatever, and while I'm training, while I'm at the gym, I'm listening to myself yap, and then I'd remember it. And it worked. For the most part, it worked. And I actually learned that from a friend who became a pharmacist. So all of these learning methods, they work. You can take the time to experiment, which brings us to our closing notes for today's episode. Now, again, since exams week or hell on earth week is coming up, what would you like to say as a final word for our audiences?
I feel like create a clean environment for yourself, an environment that you feel like you can study in, you can focus in, because your environment really plays a huge part in your studying. No one wants to study in a messy room or a loud room or just find some place, a quiet corner for yourself to study. And don't stress out. I mean, if you find a proper studying technique for yourself, yes, it takes time. For me, I actually found my studying technique last year during the summer. And so it's like it takes time. You just need to give it some time until you find something that actually works for you. And sometimes more than one thing will work for you. And then you can use those different strategies depending on what topic it is, you know?
Mm.
Yep. I would just like to say, don't stress out too much or at all, even. That's kind of what messes everybody up. It's just that they overthink, they stress out, they pick the wrong answer. A lot of people say trust your gut instinct, but at the same time, when you're stressed, you can't depend on anything. So I would say just don't pressure yourself. If other people are pressuring you, put it upon yourself to tell yourself that I can do this. If somebody else, like your parents, are pressuring you or trying to make you pick a specific major, just, confide within yourself. Tell yourself, I can do this. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, regardless if it's your parents or your friends. If there is pressure being put on you, you will mess up. It's just a fact. So try to relax. Even before the exams, study, but obviously have fun. Just, let the stress go, because that will really help with everything else.
Yeah. So eliminate the distractions, eliminate the pressure, and live your, let's say, exam period stress-free. Now, thank you, Dima, and thank you, Jude, for joining us today. It was and will always be lovely to have you on the show, and we'd like to have you again as returning guests for future episodes. And thank you for the people watching us at home. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, share. I read the comments, and I want to see some new comments. And thank you for tuning in, and we've been BISK Proud.